The radio crackled with static at 3:47 hours, breaking the desert silence that had stretched across forward operating base Kestrel for the past 6 minutes. 6 minutes of nothing. No chatter. No confirmation. No contact from Alpha Team, and that wasn't like them. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez pressed his headset tighter against his ear, straining to catch something, anything, that might explain why 8 Navy SEALs had gone dark in the middle of what should have been a routine extraction mission. Overwatch, this is base. Do you copy? Rodriguez's voice carried the tension that everyone in the command bunker felt but wouldn't voice. The mission clock showed 23 minutes since Alpha Team's last transmission, a brief package secured, moving to LZ that now felt like it had come from another lifetime. Outside, the pre-dawn darkness seemed to press against the reinforced windows of the operations center, where 6 personnel huddled around glowing screens that told them everything except what they needed to know. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb stood behind Rodriguez, his weathered hands clasped behind his back in a stance that spoke of 30 years in uniform and too many nights like this one. The silver eagles on his collar caught the blue light from the tactical displays as he studied the satellite feed that showed nothing but empty desert where his men should be. Webb had requested close air support 40 minutes ago, a standard precaution for any deep penetration mission in hostile territory. What he'd been told was that air cover was experiencing technical difficulties and would be unavailable for the immediate operational window. In military speak, that meant broken. It meant his boys were out there alone. "Sir," came a voice from the communications station. Corporal Williams, barely old enough to drink, was staring at her screen with the kind of focused intensity that meant either very good news or very bad news. "I'm picking up movement on thermal. Multiple vehicles, approximately 2 clicks north of the extraction point." Webb moved to her station, his boots silent on the polished concrete floor. The thermal imaging showed bright spots moving in formation, 4 vehicles heading directly toward where Alpha Team should be waiting for pickup. Enemy contact was always a possibility, but this felt different. This felt like a trap that was already sprung. "Get me someone on the horn who can put birds in the air," Webb said quietly, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd spent decades turning impossible situations into merely difficult ones. "I don't care if they have to duct tape wings to a shopping cart. My people need air support, and they need it now." But the night sky above the Syrian desert remained empty, holding its secrets close, while 8 of America's finest warriors faced whatever was coming for them in the darkness below. Time was running out, and everyone in that bunker knew it. The war room fell into a tense silence as every person present understood the gravity of what they were witnessing. On the main display, the thermal signatures continued their relentless advance toward Alpha Team's last known position. Webb's jaw tightened as he calculated distances and time intervals in his head, the kind of battlefield mathematics that separated living soldiers from dead heroes. The enemy vehicles would reach the extraction point in less than 12 minutes, and there was still no word from his team on the ground. "Sir, I've got something," Rodriguez called out, his voice cutting through the oppressive quiet. "It's faint, but I'm picking up a transmission on the emergency frequency." He fine-tuned the radio controls, eliminating static with the precision of a surgeon. Through the speakers came a voice that every person in the room recognized: Chief Petty Officer Thompson, Alpha Team's leader, speaking in the measured tones of a professional who knew he was likely sending his last message. Any station, this is Alpha Actual. We are compromised at the primary LZ, taking effective fire from multiple positions. Casualty report: 2 wounded, mobile but combat ineffective. Package is secure but we're pinned down. We need immediate extraction and close air support. Over. The request hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Webb looked around the room at faces that reflected his own frustration and growing desperation. The nearest ground units were 40 minutes out, an eternity in combat time. The promised air support remained a ghost in the system, delayed by mysterious technical issues that no one could adequately explain. His men were trapped in a kill zone with wounded team members, and whatever classified package they'd risked their lives to secure. "Patch me through to CENTCOM," Webb ordered, reaching for the secure telephone that connected directly to the regional command structure. "I need to talk to someone with stars on their collar and the authority to make things happen." As he lifted the handset, another voice crackled through the radio, this one unfamiliar, calm, and distinctly female. "Alpha Actual, this is Viper. I've got eyes on your position and hostile movement bearing 037 degrees from your location. How copy?" Every head in the bunker turned toward the speakers. Rodriguez frantically worked his controls, trying to identify the source of the transmission. On his scope, nothing appeared. No aircraft signature, no friendly identification beacon, nothing that would indicate American air assets in the area. Yet the voice continued with the professional confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was looking at. "Viper, this is Alpha Actual. We don't show any friendly air on our scopes. Identify yourself and your platform. Are you our promised close air support?" A pause stretched across the airwaves, filled with the distant sound of automatic weapons fire that everyone in the bunker could hear through Thompson's open microphone. When the female pilot responded, there was something in her voice, a mixture of determination and resignation, that made Webb lower the phone without dialing. "Alpha Actual, let's just say I was in the neighborhood. Stand by for immediate close air support. Danger close authorization requested." The command bunker erupted into controlled chaos as technicians scrambled to identify the mysterious aircraft that had appeared like a guardian angel above the Syrian desert. Rodriguez worked his scopes with renewed intensity, searching for any electronic signature that might reveal the identity of their unexpected savior. Corporal Williams pulled up satellite feeds, looking for visual confirmation of whatever aircraft was about to engage enemy forces less than 100 meters from Alpha Team's position. "Viper, this is Alpha Actual." Thompson's voice carried the weight of a man making a life-or-death decision for his entire team. "We have wounded personnel and are taking fire from multiple positions. If you can put steel on target, we are cleared hot for danger close engagement. Acknowledge danger close parameters." "Alpha Actual, Viper. I copy danger close engagement authorized. Recommend your team maintain current positions and keep heads down for the next 60 seconds. I'm coming in from the northeast. Break. Any personnel not wearing American flags should consider finding new employment opportunities." Webb found himself smiling despite the circumstances. Whoever this pilot was, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. The casual professionalism in her voice reminded him of the old-school aviators he'd served with in Iraq and Afghanistan, pilots who treated death-defying missions like routine traffic stops and always seemed to find humor in the darkest moments. All stations, this is Viper. I'm beginning my attack run. Time on target in 30 seconds. Alpha Team, stay put and let me work." The radio fell silent except for the background noise of distant gunfire and the heavy breathing of men under extreme stress. On the thermal display, the enemy vehicles had reached the perimeter of Alpha Team's position and were deploying dismounted infantry. Bright muzzle flashes appeared on the screen like deadly fireflies as the engagement intensified. Webb counted at least 30 hostile personnel moving to surround his trapped SEALs. "Where the hell did she come from?" Rodriguez muttered, still finding nothing on his radar displays. "I've got every sensor array in theater scanning the sky, and there's nothing up there but empty air." "Maybe that's the point," Webb replied, understanding beginning to dawn in his tactical mind. He'd heard rumors, whispers in classified briefings about aircraft that didn't appear on conventional radar, pilots who operated in the shadows between official mission parameters and plausible deniability. Assets that didn't exist on paper but somehow appeared exactly when they were needed most. The sound that came through the radio next was unlike anything the personnel in the bunker had heard before. It wasn't the familiar thunder of an A-10's GAU-8 cannon or the distinctive whine of an F-16's engine under full power. This was something different, a low, almost subsonic rumble that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, followed by the unmistakable sound of high-explosive ordnance finding its target. "Holy shit," came Thompson's voice, filled with genuine awe. "Viper, that was beautiful. Direct hit on the lead vehicle. Secondary explosions. You just bought us some breathing room." The thermal display confirmed Thompson's assessment. Where moments before there had been an advancing convoy of enemy vehicles, now there was only burning wreckage and scattered personnel fleeing in all directions. The mysterious pilot had achieved in seconds what would have taken a full squadron of conventional aircraft minutes to accomplish, and she'd done it with surgical precision that left Alpha Team completely unharmed. Alpha Actual Viper. That's just the opening act. I've got more party favors for anyone who wants to crash this particular celebration. Recommend you use this opportunity to displace to your alternate extraction point. I'll keep the bad guys busy while you move." Webb realized he was holding his breath as he listened to the tactical ballet unfolding in the desert. This mysterious pilot, whoever she was, had just transformed a potential disaster into a manageable tactical situation with a single attack run. But questions remained. Who was she? Where had she come from? And why wasn't she showing up on any of their systems? The tactical display showed Alpha Team beginning to move, carrying their wounded teammates toward the secondary extraction point 300 meters to the southeast. The enemy forces that had survived Viper's initial attack were regrouping, but their aggressive advance had been replaced by cautious defensive positioning. They'd learned respect for the invisible death that patrolled the sky above them. "Viper, this is Alpha Actual. We're moving to extraction point Beta. Can you provide overwatch during our displacement?" "Alpha Actual, I've got eyes on. Moving to high cover position. Any hostile that interferes with your movement will receive immediate attitude adjustment courtesy of American taxpayers." The professionalism mixed with dark humor was classic military aviation culture, but there was something else in the pilot's voice, a personal investment that went beyond standard mission parameters. She wasn't just providing close air support. She was personally ensuring that 8 American warriors made it home alive. Webb had heard that tone before, usually from pilots who'd been where Alpha Team was now, who understood on a visceral level what it meant to be trapped and abandoned in hostile territory. "Sir," Corporal Williams called from her workstation, "I'm showing heat signatures moving toward the alternate LZ. Looks like 2 vehicles approaching from the west." Webb cursed under his breath. The enemy was adapting faster than expected, attempting to cut off Alpha Team's escape route before they could reach the extraction point. It was a smart tactical move that demonstrated these weren't just random insurgents. They were dealing with professional soldiers who understood battlefield dynamics and could adapt their strategy in real time. "Viper Alpha Actual, we've got movement on our extraction point. 2 vehicles approaching from the west. Can you interdict?" The response came immediately, without hesitation or discussion of risk assessments. "Alpha Actual Viper, I see them. Consider them interdicted." What followed was a demonstration of precision aviation that left everyone in the bunker speechless. The thermal display showed the 2 approaching vehicles suddenly stopping, then erupting in simultaneous explosions that painted the desert floor with spreading pools of superheated metal and burning fuel. The attack had been so quick and accurate that it seemed almost supernatural, as if the very sky itself had reached down to swat away threats to the Americans below. "Jesus Christ," Rodriguez whispered, staring at his instruments that still showed empty air above the battlefield. "How is she doing that? I've got every radar in the AOR scanning that grid square, and there's nothing there." "Maybe we're asking the wrong questions," Webb replied thoughtfully. "Instead of wondering how she's invisible, maybe we should be asking why she's there at all. What kind of pilot flies an aircraft that doesn't exist to save people who were supposedly beyond help? The answer, when it came, would reshape everything they thought they knew about the war they were fighting, and the guardian angels who watched over those who served in the shadows between officially acknowledged operations and the classified reality of modern warfare. Thompson's voice cut through the radio static with the controlled urgency of a professional soldier who just witnessed something that challenged his understanding of modern combat. Viper, Alpha Actual, outstanding work on those vehicles. We're 2 minutes out from extraction point Beta. Can you confirm the LZ is clear? Alpha Actual Viper. I'm showing clear skis and peaceful real estate at your destination. No hostile movement within a 5-click radius. Whoever these people were, they've decided they have somewhere else to be tonight. In the command bunker, Webb studied the tactical display with the intensity of a chess grandmaster examining a crucial endgame position. The mysterious pilot had systematically dismantled what should have been a successful enemy ambush, turning their trap into a turkey shoot that left hostile forces scattered and demoralized. It was the kind of air support that every ground commander dreamed of: precise, devastating, and apparently unlimited by the normal constraints of ammunition or fuel. "Sir," Rodriguez called out, his voice carrying a note of professional confusion that Webb had rarely heard from his senior NCO. "I just ran a complete diagnostic on all our sensor arrays. Everything's functioning perfectly. I'm picking up radio transmissions from this Viper pilot, but there's no corresponding radar signature, no infrared bloom from engine exhaust, no electronic emissions that would indicate any known aircraft platform." Webb nodded slowly, pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to form in his mind. In 30 years of military service, he'd learned that the most important operations were often the ones that officially never happened. Black projects that existed in the spaces between congressional oversight and operational necessity. Aircraft that were developed in windowless buildings by engineers who signed documents ensuring they'd never discuss their work, even with their own families. "Viper, this is Base Actual," Webb said, taking the microphone from Rodriguez. "I want to personally thank you for what you've done tonight. 8 of my best people are alive because you showed up when we needed you most. I don't know who you are or where you came from, but I won't forget this." The pause that followed lasted long enough for Webb to wonder if the mysterious pilot had disappeared as suddenly as she'd arrived. When her response finally came, it carried a weight of emotion that surprised everyone listening. "Base Actual Viper. Those men down there are my brothers. I've been where they are tonight, abandoned, outgunned, and forgotten by the system that sent me into harm's way. Nobody gets left behind on my watch. Not anymore." The personal nature of her response hit Webb like a physical blow. This wasn't just professional obligation speaking. This was someone who'd experienced the bitter taste of abandonment firsthand. Someone who'd made a personal commitment to ensure that other warriors never faced what she'd endured. It was the voice of someone who understood that the true brotherhood of arms extended beyond official chains of command and bureaucratic approval processes. "Alpha Actual, this is Viper. I'm showing your extraction bird inbound, ETA 4 minutes. Recommend you pop smoke and prepare for immediate departure. I'll maintain overwatch until your wheels up and heading home." Webb looked at the mission clock and realized that less than an hour had passed since Alpha Team first went dark. In that time, a mission that should have resulted in 8 casualties or captured personnel had been transformed into a successful extraction, thanks to the intervention of a pilot who officially didn't exist flying an aircraft that supposedly wasn't there. "Viper Alpha Actual, smoke is out, LZ is marked. I can hear the bird inbound. Before we go, I need to ask, will we see you again if we need you?" The response came with the certainty of a sacred oath. "Alpha Actual Viper, I'll be around, count on it." As the rescue helicopter appeared on the horizon, its rotors beating a familiar rhythm against the pre-dawn sky, Webb found himself staring upward into the darkness that had hidden their guardian angel. Somewhere in that empty air was a pilot who'd redefined everything he thought he knew about loyalty, duty, and the unbreakable bonds that connected warriors across time and circumstance. She'd appeared from nowhere, saved 8 lives, and disappeared back into legend. But her promise remained, hanging in the air like a benediction. She'd be around when they needed her most. The rescue helicopter touched down in a swirl of dust and rotor wash, its crew chiefs immediately moving to help Alpha Team load their wounded teammates aboard the aircraft. Through the radio, Webb heard Thompson's final transmission before departure. "Viper, Alpha Actual, package and personnel secure. We're heading home thanks to you. Until we meet again." Alpha Actual Viper, fly safe, brothers, see you on the other side. The helicopter lifted off into the growing dawn, carrying 8 American warriors away from what should have been their final mission. As the aircraft disappeared toward the horizon, the radio fell silent, and the mysterious pilot vanished back into whatever shadows had birthed her. But in the command bunker at Fob Kestrel, 6 people sat in contemplative silence, knowing they'd witnessed something extraordinary, a reminder that in the darkest moments of warfare, guardian angels sometimes wore flight suits and spoke with the voices of those who'd sworn that no one would ever be left behind again. 3 weeks later, the after-action reports would be sanitized and classified, filed away in archives that officially didn't exist. Alpha Team would receive commendations for their successful mission, with no mention of the mysterious air support that had saved their lives. The enemy casualties would be attributed to coalition air assets, in language so vague that it revealed nothing while technically reporting everything. But in the informal networks that connected military professionals across branches and classifications, stories began to spread. Whispers of a pilot who appeared when conventional air support failed, who flew aircraft that radar couldn't detect, who spoke with the voice of someone who'd been abandoned and had sworn it would never happen again. They called her Viper, and the stories grew with each telling. How she'd saved a SEAL team in Syria, how she'd provided cover for a Marine reconnaissance unit in Somalia, how she'd appeared over a remote outpost in Afghanistan just as enemy forces prepared to overrun American positions. The stories were never officially confirmed, never documented in ways that could be verified through normal channels. But among the special operations community, among pilots who flew dangerous missions in hostile airspace, among ground commanders who'd learned that promises of air support often evaporated when political winds shifted, the legend of Viper became something more than rumor. It became hope, the knowledge that somewhere in the sky, a guardian angel wore American wings and carried the promise that brotherhood extended beyond bureaucracy, that loyalty transcended official channels, and that no warrior would ever again face the darkness alone. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb returned to his quarters as the sun rose over the Syrian desert, carrying with him questions that would haunt his remaining years of service. He'd spent 3 decades in uniform, had commanded units in Iraq and Afghanistan, had seen the best and worst that warfare could produce. But nothing had prepared him for the night he'd witnessed the impossible made manifest, a pilot who existed between the lines of official reality, who flew missions that were never logged, who saved lives that officially were never in danger. In his private moments, Webb found himself scanning the skies during subsequent operations, listening for that calm, professional voice that had transformed disaster into victory with surgical precision and unwavering determination. He never heard it again on his missions, but the stories continued to filter through the community, always third-hand, always unverifiable, always carrying the ring of truth that military professionals recognized when they heard accounts of genuine heroism. The classified databases showed no record of any pilot with the call sign Viper. Personnel files contained no female aviator who matched the voice they'd heard that night. Flight logs from every air base in the region showed no aircraft departures or returns that corresponded with the timeline of Alpha Team's extraction. It was as if their guardian angel had materialized from pure necessity and disappeared back into the collective unconscious of military folklore. But Webb knew what he'd heard, what his people had witnessed, what 8 Navy SEALs had experienced firsthand. Somewhere in the vast machinery of American military power, someone had made a decision that brotherhood mattered more than bureaucracy, that saving lives justified operating in the gray areas between official policy and battlefield necessity. Someone had chosen to be the guardian angel that every warrior hoped for but rarely encountered. Years later, when Webb had retired and was teaching military history at the War College, he would tell his students about the night air cover was broken, and a ghost made of aluminum and determination had emerged from the darkness to prove that the warrior's creed, that no one gets left behind, wasn't just words on a memorial wall. It was a promise kept by those who understood that true service sometimes required operating beyond the boundaries of official recognition, in the shadows where heroes wore no medals, but carried the absolute knowledge that they'd made a difference when it mattered most. The story of Viper would become part of military legend, whispered in ready rooms and transmitted through the informal networks that connected warriors across generations. She was proof that somewhere in the vast complexity of modern warfare, the ancient bonds of military brotherhood still held meaning, still motivated individuals to risk everything for comrades they'd never met but would never abandon. And on quiet nights, when young officers found themselves responsible for missions that pushed the boundaries of support and possibility, they would look up at empty skis and whisper a call sign that had become synonymous with hope. Viper, if you're out there, we could use a guardian angel tonight. The answer never came through official channels, was never logged in flight records, never appeared on radar screens. But sometimes, when the situation was desperate enough and the need was genuine, the impossible would happen. Steel would rain from empty skis, enemies would be scattered by invisible hands, and American warriors would return home with stories they could never officially tell about the angel who watched over those who served in the shadows of classified operations. Captain Alexis, Viper, Thorne powered down her F-35 Lightning II in a hangar that didn't appear on any base schematic, in a facility that existed in the classified spaces between official acknowledgement and operational necessity. Her hands moved through the post-flight checklist with the automatic precision of someone who'd performed these actions thousands of times, but her mind remained focused on the voices she'd heard over the radio. 8 American warriors who'd faced death in a foreign desert and lived, because she'd been there when conventional support had failed. The stealth fighter around her represented the cutting edge of American aviation technology, but it was officially assigned to a test squadron that conducted evaluation flights in carefully controlled airspace under highly regulated conditions. The aircraft's actual capabilities, its true mission parameters, and the identity of its pilots remained buried in classification levels that most military professionals didn't even know existed. Viper was a ghost who flew a ghost, operating in missions that officially never happened to save people who were never officially in danger. As she completed her shutdown procedures, Viper reflected on the path that had brought her to this moment. 8 years ago, she'd been Captain Alexis Thorne, flying F-16s out of Balad Air Base in Iraq, providing close air support for ground units operating in the most dangerous sectors of the war. She'd been good at her job, exceptional, according to her fitness reports, but her career had ended abruptly when she disobeyed direct orders to abandon a special forces unit that was trapped behind enemy lines. The official record stated that Captain Thorne had experienced mechanical difficulties that prevented her from responding to a recall order. The unofficial reality was that she'd made a conscious decision to remain in hostile airspace, providing cover for 12 Green Berets who were fighting for their lives against overwhelming odds. Her actions that day had saved every member of the unit, but they'd also ended her conventional military career. You didn't disobey direct orders from field-grade officers, and expect to continue serving in normal command structures. The court-martial had been swift and decisive. Guilty of failure to obey lawful orders, guilty of unauthorized use of military aircraft, guilty of conducting offensive operations without proper authorization. The sentence had been discharge from service and loss of all benefits, a professional death penalty for someone who devoted her entire adult life to military aviation. But as the gavel fell and her career officially ended, a man in civilian clothes had approached her outside the courthouse with an offer that would change everything. "Captain Thorne," he'd said, "there are some people who'd like to discuss your future. People who think your particular skills and decision-making abilities might be valuable in a different kind of service. Interested in a conversation." That conversation had led to a facility that didn't exist, with people who had no official titles, offering her a chance to continue serving in ways that couldn't be acknowledged through normal channels. The program was simple: fly missions that couldn't be officially sanctioned, provide support that couldn't be officially authorized, save lives that couldn't be officially endangered. In return, she'd receive the best aircraft available to American aviation, unlimited operational latitude, and the absolute certainty that her actions would make a difference in the lives of warriors who served their country in the darkest corners of global conflict. "Another successful evening, Captain." The voice belonged to her commanding officer, a man she knew only as Colonel Smith, whose real name was certainly something else entirely. He was responsible for overseeing a program that officially didn't exist, managing pilots who weren't officially in service, coordinating with ground units through channels that left no paper trail. "8 people going home tonight who wouldn't have otherwise," Viper replied, securing her flight helmet in a locker that bore no identification markings. The SEALs performed well under pressure. Their ground commander knew what he was doing. Clean extraction, minimal casualties, mission objectives achieved. Smith nodded with the satisfaction of someone who understood the mathematics of military success. Lives saved, objectives achieved, political complications avoided. The program he managed existed specifically to address situations where conventional military responses were insufficient or politically untenable. When American personnel needed support that couldn't be officially provided, when missions required capabilities that didn't officially exist, when success demanded operating in the gray areas between policy and necessity, that's when pilots like Viper earned their pay. "The after-action reports from FOB Kestrel are interesting reading," Smith continued. "Lieutenant Colonel Webb seems to think he encountered some kind of supernatural intervention. 8 separate witness statements describing air support that appeared from nowhere and disappeared without explanation. Radar operators swearing their equipment was functioning perfectly while showing no aircraft in the area. It's almost like you were never there at all." Viper smiled at the compliment embedded in Smith's observation. The F-35 stealth capabilities were impressive enough in conventional operations, but the aircraft she flew had been modified with technologies that pushed the boundaries of what was possible with current engineering. Radar-absorbent materials that made her invisible to electronic detection, engine modifications that eliminated infrared signatures, communication systems that allowed her to monitor and transmit on any frequency without revealing her position or aircraft type. "The ground team never needed to know who was providing support," Viper replied. "They just needed to know that someone was watching over them. Mission accomplished." But even as she spoke, Viper knew that her intervention that night had been about more than mission parameters or operational objectives. When she'd heard those voices over the radio, professional soldiers facing impossible odds with calm determination, she'd been transported back to her own moment of abandonment, her own experience of being told that support wasn't available when her team needed it most. The difference was that she'd been in a position to do something about it, to ensure that other warriors never faced what she'd endured. "There's something else," Smith said, his tone shifting to indicate classified information was about to be shared. Intelligence suggests that the enemy forces Alpha Team encountered weren't random insurgents. Professional soldiers, probably Iranian Revolutionary Guard advisors, conducting a specific operation to capture American Special Operations personnel for intelligence purposes. This was a targeted ambush, not a chance encounter. The implications of Smith's revelation settled over Viper like cold water. Alpha Team hadn't just stumbled into hostile territory. They'd been deliberately lured into a trap designed to capture American Special Operations personnel alive. The mission parameters had been compromised from the beginning, and conventional air support had been mysteriously unavailable at the exact moment when it was needed most. Someone had wanted those SEALs captured, and only her intervention had prevented what could have been a significant intelligence disaster. "Any idea how they knew about the mission?" Viper asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Still investigating, but initial analysis suggests the leak came from higher up the chain of command. Someone with access to mission planning documents and operational timelines, which means there are people in positions of authority who aren't particularly concerned about the welfare of our people in the field." Viper felt a familiar anger building in her chest, the same rage that had driven her to disobey orders 8 years ago, the fury that came from realizing that American warriors were being used as expendable assets in political games played by people who'd never faced enemy fire. It was the reason she'd accepted Smith's offer, the driving force behind every mission she flew for the program that didn't exist. "What's our next move?" she asked, already knowing that she'd accept whatever mission was offered, regardless of risk or complexity. "For now, we continue monitoring communications from Special Operations units. When someone needs help that can't come through official channels, you'll be there." The Viper legend is starting to spread through the community, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes knowing that someone's watching over you is as valuable as the actual protection. As Viper walked toward the quarters that housed pilots who officially didn't exist, she reflected on the strange turn her career had taken. She'd started as a conventional military aviator, following established procedures and operating within clearly defined parameters. Now she was something else entirely, a guardian angel for warriors who served in the shadows, a ghost who flew missions that were never logged, a legend that gave hope to people who faced impossible odds in service to their country. The official records would never acknowledge what she'd done that night, would never document the lives she'd saved or the mission she'd made possible. But in the informal networks that connected military professionals across branches and classifications, stories would be told, whispers would spread. And somewhere, a young pilot facing a court-martial for disobeying orders to abandon comrades might hear about a program that offered a different kind of service, a different way to honor the warrior's creed that no one gets left behind. Viper fell asleep that night knowing that 8 American warriors were alive because she'd been there when they needed her most. It was a satisfaction that no official recognition could match, a fulfillment that came from keeping faith with the bonds that connected all who served. Tomorrow would bring new missions, new challenges, new opportunities to prove that brotherhood transcended bureaucracy, and that some promises were too important to be constrained by official policy. In her dreams, she flew through empty skis, watching over warriors who served in the darkness, ready to appear whenever the call came through frequencies that officially didn't exist, carrying weapons that weren't officially deployed, flown by pilots who had officially been discharged from service, but had chosen to continue serving in ways that couldn't be acknowledged. The legend of Viper was just beginning, but already it represented something that the military bureaucracy had forgotten, that true service sometimes required operating beyond the boundaries of official recognition, in the spaces where honor mattered more than policy, and where keeping faith with fellow warriors was worth any personal sacrifice. 2 months after the Syrian extraction, the legend had grown beyond Smith's most optimistic projections. Reports filtered through classified channels from 3 different theaters of operation: Somalia, Afghanistan, and Libya, describing similar incidents of mysterious air support appearing when conventional assets were unavailable. Special operations units reported being saved by a pilot who identified herself only as Viper, flying an aircraft that appeared on no radar screens and left no electronic signatures. The Pentagon's Analysis Division had assigned a task force to investigate what they termed anomalous air support incidents, but their efforts yielded nothing concrete. Flight logs showed no aircraft departures that corresponded with the reported activities. Personnel files contained no pilots matching the voice recordings that had been captured by various ground units. It was as if Viper existed in a parallel dimension that occasionally intersected with conventional military operations at exactly the right moment to prevent disasters. Colonel Smith read these reports with professional satisfaction and personal concern. The program's success was undeniable. American personnel were coming home alive from missions that should have resulted in casualties or capture. But the growing attention from official channels threatened the operational security that allowed Viper and her fellow pilots to function effectively. Too much curiosity from the wrong people could compromise everything they'd built. "We have a problem," he announced during the weekly briefing to the pilots who officially didn't exist. The conference room was located 3 levels below ground in a facility that appeared on no government property maps, furnished with equipment that had been purchased through appropriations that were buried so deeply in the defense budget that even budget analysts couldn't trace their origins. Viper looked up from the intelligence summary she'd been reading, a report about Iranian Revolutionary Guard activities in Syria that suggested the enemy was adapting their tactics based on her previous interventions. They were learning to recognize when their operations might attract the attention of the ghost pilot who'd been disrupting their activities across the region. "The good news is that our operations have been completely successful from a tactical standpoint," Smith continued. "0 casualties among the American personnel we've supported, mission objectives achieved in every case, no compromise of classified information or personnel. You've saved 37 lives in the past 8 weeks, prevented the capture of 2 high-value targets, and disrupted enemy operations across multiple theaters." The pilot sitting across from Viper, call sign Phantom, a former Marine aviator who'd been recruited under similar circumstances, raised an eyebrow at the casualty figures. They all knew the numbers, had discussed them during informal gatherings in the facility's recreation area, but hearing the statistics presented formally emphasized the scope of what they'd accomplished. "The bad news is that someone at the Pentagon has noticed the pattern. They've established a task force to investigate what they're calling unidentified air support assets operating in contested airspace. 3-star general in charge, unlimited budget, authorization to access classified programs at any level necessary to determine the source of these mysterious interventions." Viper felt her stomach tighten. She'd known this moment would come eventually. The program's very success made it vulnerable to discovery by officials who might not appreciate the political necessity of maintaining operations that couldn't be officially acknowledged. The wrong kind of attention could shut down everything they'd built, leaving special operations units without the guardian angels who'd become their insurance policy against abandonment. "What's our response?" she asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "We adapt," Smith replied with the calm certainty of someone who'd spent decades operating in the classified margins of government service. "The program continues, but with enhanced operational security measures, new protocols for mission selection, improved stealth capabilities for your aircraft, and most importantly, a complete revision of how we interact with ground units during operations." The briefing that followed detailed changes that would make their interventions even more mysterious, more difficult to trace or analyze. advanced communication protocols that would prevent their transmissions from being recorded or analyzed by conventional intelligence assets, modified flight profiles,